Alright students, this is your video guide for the revision plan and reflection. Don't be thrown by the fact that it's worded differently than it shows up in the book. It's the same thing, obviously. But this first page is just some information that you should read to understand, what the whole process is, why you're doing it, what the percentage of the grade is it talks about in there. So it's just some information you should read again just to make sure, some of it may mean um, some of it may be stuff you already know, but just read to make sure there's nothing in here that you haven't already gotten from it. But I'm going to scroll down to here where it's a little bit more important. Um, this part is telling you about how midterm grading works. So if you have had English 101, then you probably already encountered this and you probably already know what I'm about to talk about here. But if you're not familiar with this, then this is something you need to understand. At midterm, nobody gets anything better than a C. Okay, so it says this course takes a competency approach to grading at midterm point. The highest grade possible for anybody is a C, which just basically means you're doing fine. You could have a B or an A even, but you'll still get a C. And you know how you're doing, right? You know what you're doing. If you don't have any zeros, or if you only have one or two zeros and everything else is ones for your actual grade book, then you know that when it comes to at least turning stuff in, you're doing good. And if you're getting good feedback from me, like for example on the ABIB, if you've gotten good feedback from me, or if I told you to fix things and you're working on fixing them, or you've already resubmitted them for me to give you more feedback, if you do that, you know that you're above C. So you know how you're doing. I think you probably do anyway. But just realize that the only thing you have to worry about is if you get a D or an F. If you get below a C, so in other words, let's look at this. A C means you're currently on track to meet all the goals and you're doing everything well, right? It's a placeholder. It doesn't count in any way, shape, or form ever against you. Your midterm grade is not factored into your final grade. All your midterm is just to let you know where you're at this moment, and that's it. Okay, so it's nothing to stress about unless you get less than a C. If you get less than a C, then that means you're doing something, you're having problems. Maybe you've got too many zeros. Maybe you failed to turn in your annotated bib on time, or you had a lot of work that you had to do on it. Maybe you haven't turned in your exercises, whatever. In other words, that means there's some things you're not doing quite right, and you just need to work on that, right? So you'll get specific feedback. You'll get a feedback form report telling you where your problem areas are and giving you some ideas, even as to how to fix them. So that's what you'll want to look for. If you get higher than a C, you won't get a report or anything. You'll just get a grade. You'll just get the grade C. But if you get lower than a C, if you're working at a D or an F level, then you'll get that feedback form letting you know, okay, and telling you more about it. As always, if you have questions, don't hesitate whatsoever to ask. Okay, there's no bad or dumb or silly question. I have a saying that I say, and it's this: the only dumb question is the question never asked. Okay, so don't feel bad about or embarrassed about asking the question at all. Now, here's the assignment itself. At midterm, this just talks about what the assignment is about and how it works and all this stuff. So read this stuff to understand it. I'm not going to baby you and read for you. You can read this yourself. Just realize that your due date of course, is not the same as this one. Your due date is, as I've already mentioned, the 28th. So, and I can't change this because it's a PDF. So just realize that this was made, a couple years ago, and so your due date's obviously going to be different from theirs. But your due date is not the 23rd; it's the 28th. So just remember that. All right. Make sure. Okay, this is just a reminder about the miscellaneous items. Make sure you're completing the work for the miscellaneous items. This again, uh, up until this semester, they were required. At some time, but before this, I was requiring students to submit them with every assignment that they went with, and the students didn't like that. They griped about that. So I don't think it's possible to please obviously every student. You know, some of you may not be liking the way it's done now, and you'd rather have to do them every week or every time they're due, and that's up to you. If you want to submit them with your assignments and get them done as you go along, that's perfectly fine. But the main thing is you just want to keep them in a folder or whatever, so that you'll have 7 of them by the time the end of the semester comes around and you're ready to do the portfolio. Okay, so this is really the big part. This is the gist of it. So you'll remember in the textbook I told you these pages are the same ones that are in the textbook. So this is the same page that or actually, no, that's not the same page. These are the same page. This is just information to help you understand what you're working on right here. Okay, again, you can read these. Make sure these are some things you should include, even if whether or not they're on either one of these documents. They are additional. They may be additional things that you should consider, such as like you might want to talk in there about how many absences you have. Um, you might want to talk a little bit about, of course, arriving to class has nothing to do with what we do, so you don't have to worry about that one. Are you completing your assignments on time? Are you contributing to the whole class activities and the discussions? Right. Of course, some of these things are more geared toward the classroom, but you can apply them to, you can think about how they would work toward online as well. So this is the big part. Notice where I have out here part 1 and part 2. These things where you see says part 1 and part 2, these are the key elements. These are the things you have to look at and use and apply. Of course, the first one, these are clickable. The first one, it'll bring up this page, and this is the page that you saw in the textbook. Remember, I told you first part was just reflection, how the purpose of the reflection. The second part was what to actually write in your memo. So you're in your reflection plan, your reflection. So you want to make sure that you use all this information, right? Um, Let me make sure it's shared. Uh, I'm gonna have to go in and make sure this is shared with you all because I'm not sure if it is or not. I'll have to fix that. It looks like it might not be. Either I'm coming into it from the wrong way or something. It's not letting me actually. It doesn't look like it would want me to access it. So anyway, this is what you'll be filling out. Just fill out this. Complete these parts in the form of a memo. Your reflection will be in the form of a memo, a business memo. Okay, so you want to make sure that it looks like a business memo. And if you're not sure about that, all you have to do is use the Google, and you can find all kinds of samples of how to do business memos, and you could just use them. Use a template from them. This is something you could use if you want to. It's not terribly helpful because you only really have one thing to talk about, and that's the annotated bibliography. But you could do it if you want to for that. That's up to you. That's just something that you could use. And then the writing activity, this is the revision plan. So this is the other part. So again, you might recognize this is the same thing that was in the JAC chapter. And it has this information about how much time did you spend on the project. This, of course, is going to primarily be about the annotated bib at this point. But you could also talk in this about your source evaluation. That would work too as something you could consider for this midterm. So just complete these things. Write it based on these questions, right? There's information in the Easy Writer to help you about it. I don't know if it lines up right with the page numbers because the Easy Writer changes so much. but you can still find that kind of stuff. Like all we'd have to do in the Easy Writer is to look up taking and writing inventory, and you'd probably be able to find that even if it's on a different page, different pages or something. Okay. Um, the more specific items on your list are, the better. Writing revised introduction is pretty vague and generic. On the other hand, use a different strategy for introduction to make it more interesting would be a little bit more detailed, right? You're talking about something that's actionable, right? You can act on that. So that's the kind of thing you want to think about as you're writing your revision plan. You want it to be actionable, things that you can work on and fix, right? Ideas about what you can do to fix it and make it better. Okay? So those two items are the big things. Those are the main. These are the two things you'll be turning in. Part 1 and Part 2. That's all you got to remember is Part 1 and Part 2. You'll be putting those on one document. Part 1, the reflection, will be in the form of a business memo. Part 2 will just simply be a plan. You won't have to put it in any kind of special format. Just use paragraphs like you would an exercise, right? However you want to do that. You could even, I wouldn't even care in this case if you did like a question and answer type list. That would even be okay. The reflection, though, has to be in paragraphs. It has to be written like a memo. Okay, again, look up how to do a memo or look up some templates of memos, and that will help you with that. Okay, and just read all this stuff. Make sure you understand everything that it's talking about, and that should be good enough to help you do really well with this. And if there's any questions, as always, please, please, please do not ever hesitate. Do not ever hesitate to ask for help. Okay, that's what I'm here for. And that will do it for this video.